Okay, so we're checking the oil on the gyro plane this morning, and when you pull your stick out, if you notice that it looks like it's overfilled like that, there's a reason for that. And that reason is this filter, despite being a Rotax, here's a Rotax brand filter on there, the filter is actually leaking back. In other words, so it'll leak back, and the amount of oil in the filter here, it'll leak down till it's down to about the center where the where the line leads out of the filter, and it'll look like you're overfilled with your oil. So what that is that's kind of proof positive that your nice oil filter is leaking back.
Is it a specialty of that particular oil filter?
Well, we find it, we used to use some off-brand oil filters for these things, and we quit doing that because frequently the oil filters would leak back. So we're like, that's not a good idea, because what happens is when the engine starts, the oil pump has to pump until it fills the filter up, and then you're pumping oil. So you're actually starting it with no oil flow for a few seconds, which is not great on wear on the engine, all right? So this is the first time I've seen this one, or noticed that this one is apparently leaking back. So it's time for an oil change, but also if you find that on there, it probably might not be a bad idea to go ahead and change and put a different oil filter on there, because you don't want it leaking back and essentially the engine starting with no oil flow for a few seconds. So. Okay, so the next thing, after discovering that, we pushed the aircraft out and went ahead and started the engine and let it run for about 15 or 20 seconds, and then shut it down to recheck the oil. I'll show you what we found. Pull the stick out, wipe it off, put it back in here, pull it out, and now it's down where in the level where it should be, not up here.
Right. Okay.
Like it was overfilled.
I got it in the picture.
So if you check the oil after the aircraft sat in the hangar all night long, Rotax engine, and you check the oil and it looks like the oil is overfilled because it's way up too far on the stick, it's not. It's your oil filter is back leaking, and you need to replace the oil filter. Okay, so if you think that your oil filter is back leaking and you don't have a filter to replace it with, then one of the tricks you can do, since you're not starting essentially with no oil flow, is leave the mags off on the aircraft and then just crank it until you're showing oil pressure. See, oil pressure is 0. Crank it. There we go. We're coming up now. We've got oil filter showing. We're showing 2.6 bars or whatever. That's because they're just recently ran. But anyway, what you'll find is when your oil filter is back leaking, when you hit that and you motor it for the first 3 or 4 or 5 seconds, you don't have any oil pressure. And then oil pressure shows up on there. So what you want to do is motor it until you've got oil pressure, and then you can turn your mags on and go ahead and start the engine.
Right.
And I apologize for the poor audio there. It was quite windy. Winds were gusting up to 37 when we were doing that video. So anyway, just to review that, if you think that your oil filter is back leaking, to give yourself a little insurance that you've got oil flow from the time that the engine starts, what you want to do is just leave your mags off, hit your start button and motor the engine until you're showing oil pressure, and then you can turn on your mags and hit your start button and start the engine, and you should have oil flow from the get-go. Then it's not a good idea to start engines even just for a few seconds without oil flow. Most of the wear of an engine actually occurs during startup, and if you've got no oil flow for a few seconds, that's not a good idea. So if you don't have a filter to replace it immediately, you can do that and motor the engine with the mags off, get you some oil pressure, and then start the engine. Okay, so what causes the back leaking with the filter? Well, let's talk real quickly about how oil filter is designed. You see that you've got holes on the outside here, and then a central hole in the center. And how the oil usually flows through the filter is it comes in through these outer holes, goes through the walls of the element that's in there. The element's usually made of cellulose or fiberglass or some combination of those two, and then comes out the hole and is returned to the engine. That's the usual method, right? In the bottom of this filter, or be the top or the bottom, I guess your point of view or side, whatever. In there you've got a pressure relief valve, and the purpose of that pressure relief valve is so that if the oil filter is clogged or the oil is too thick to actually push through the filter because it's so cold, that sort of thing, then that pressure relief valve can actually open and allow oil to flow past, so that your engine is not starved for oil flow. Right? The problem is that pressure relief valve is not aligned well, then it can cause it to back leak. And actually, Greg Grimminger made a little tool, and I need to make one up again, I guess now and then. That where it's a little fitting you screw on. It has a rubber hose on it, and so you screw it onto the filters when you get these filters in. Screw that hose onto the filter, and then blow through the rubber hose. You should feel a whole lot of resistance if it's having to go. That air is having to go through the filter, and the relief valve is functioning normally. There should be a lot of resistance to blowing air through that filter. If you go to blow on the tube and the air goes right through, there's almost no resistance to it. That's got a bad pressure valve in it. It's not aligned correctly, and that will backflow. So you got some oil that's not being filtered because it's flowing by, and also the filter, if it's a side-mounted filter like that, the oil can back leak out of the filter, so that and cause the problems with not having immediate oil flow at the time of startup. So that's a concern. So I'll show you guys a little view of what it looks like looking down through the hole here in just a second. So when you look down through the hole in the oil filter, you can see the pressure relief valve there, and this one's actually lined up. But if you look down in there to look at the assembly, and it depends on how the oil filter is made and what particular brand it is, sometimes you can look down and you'll see that obviously that it's not centered up in the hole, and if you see that, the thing is going to back leak all get out. So I hope this information was useful and helpful to you, and if you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys on the next video.